Hi, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm Julia, and I'm so glad you're here. If you've ever felt frustrated trying to follow fast English conversations, you're not alone. In fact, you're in exactly the right place. Today, I want to help you understand something important. Becoming a better English listener doesn't require you to be perfect or to understand every word. It starts with simple habits, a little consistency, and most of all, the belief that you can train your ears to do what they were designed to do: understand patterns, sounds, and meaning, step by step. So take a deep breath. You don't need to chase perfection. You don't need to worry about grammar rules right now. This episode is all about making listening feel natural and achievable for you, no matter where you are in your learning journey. Whether you're on your way to work, cooking dinner, or just relaxing, I want this moment to feel like a pause from the pressure and a return to confidence. You can do this. Let's begin with something honest. How often have you watched a video, listened to a podcast, or tried to follow a conversation in English and felt completely lost? Maybe the words felt like a blur. Maybe you caught the beginning, but lost the meaning halfway through. Maybe you nodded, pretending you understood, just to avoid feeling embarrassed. I've heard these stories from learners everywhere, from Barcelona, from Warsaw, from Istanbul, from Copenhagen, and I can tell you, this is more common than you think. The good news is, it's not a personal failure. It's just a lack of training. And today, we're going to change that. You don't need to speak fast to be fluent. You don't even need to understand fast conversations right away. What you need is a method, a way to approach listening that feels clear, structured, and supportive. We're going to talk about how to practice with daily English that actually sounds like how people speak. Not textbook examples, not slow and robotic pronunciation, but real, natural conversation. The kind of English that happens when someone orders coffee in London, answers the phone in Manchester, gives directions in Dublin, or checks in at a hotel in Rome. Now, let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that some people seem to pick up English listening skills easily, while others struggle for years? The difference isn't talent. It's exposure. It's the type of practice. It's what I call smart listening. You don't need hours every day. You need the right 5 minutes, with the right kind of audio, repeated the right way. That's what makes the difference. I remember talking to a listener named Lena from Munich. She had been learning English for years but told me she still panicked every time someone asked her a question at work. She was afraid she wouldn't understand them fast enough, so we changed her approach. Instead of trying to memorize more vocabulary or grammar, she started listening to one short dialogue every day, just 2 or 3 minutes long. She played it while brushing her teeth, walking her dog, or waiting for the train. After just 2 weeks, she told me she felt calmer. She didn't understand every word, but she understood enough, and that gave her the confidence to keep going. That's what this episode is about. So, if you're here today thinking, I understand English when I read it, but not when I hear it, you are exactly where you need to be. And if you're thinking, I know what words mean, but people speak too fast, I want to challenge that idea. Most people don't speak too fast. We just haven't practiced hearing English at its natural rhythm. But the great thing is, your brain can learn that rhythm just like it did in your native language. You just need regular, clear practice, with small steps that build over time. One thing I really want to emphasize is that this podcast is here for you. And when you support it by subscribing, by leaving a review, or by sharing it with a friend, you help our community grow. The more we grow, the more resources we can create, and the more people we can reach who are struggling just like you were. So if you're enjoying this content, take a second to hit the follow button or leave a comment. It makes a big difference, and it lets me know what's working for you. I also want to say something from the heart. Learning English is not just about learning a language. It's about expanding your world. It's about giving yourself more options, more freedom, and more confidence. Whether you want to travel, work abroad, connect with new people, or just understand the media you love, improving your listening skills is a big part of that journey. And it's a journey you don't have to take alone. In this episode, I'll guide you through practical ways to improve your listening. You'll hear stories from learners in different cities, just like you. You'll get tips you can use today. And my hope is that, by the end, you'll feel more empowered and less overwhelmed. Listening to English doesn't have to be a mystery. It can become something natural, something familiar, even something you look forward to. So as we dive in, I want you to stay relaxed. Let the words come to you. Don't force yourself to understand every single word. That's not the goal. The goal is to enjoy the process, to connect to the meaning, and to trust that your brain is learning because it is. Every time you listen, even if you miss parts, your brain is adjusting. It's learning the patterns, the rhythm, the sounds. And that progress is real, even when you can't see it right away. So here's my invitation to you today. Just listen. No pressure, no fear, just curiosity and attention. If something feels too fast, that's okay. We'll work through it together. And by the end of this episode, I hope you'll not only understand more English, but also feel more motivated to keep listening. That's how fluency begins, not with perfection, but with presence. Just you, here, now, giving your brain the chance to grow. And if this resonates with you, if you've ever felt alone in your learning, or stuck, or unsure, remember that this community is for you. You belong here. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're right on time. Let's make listening easier, together. One of the most common things I hear from learners is this: I can't understand native speakers, they speak too fast. And I get it. It feels like the words come at you like a wave, and before you can even catch the first part, they're already on to the next sentence. It's frustrating, and it makes you feel like maybe you're just not good at English. But I want to challenge that idea today, because the real problem isn't speed, it's structure. It's what your brain has been trained to expect and what it's missing. Think about it like this. If you spent most of your time learning English through written texts, grammar books, or slow recordings, your brain has become used to a certain structure. It sees every word written clearly, separated with space and punctuation. It gets to take its time. But when you hear someone speak, especially naturally, that structure disappears. Spoken English is full of reductions, linking sounds, stress patterns, and pauses that don't match what you've seen on the page. So when someone says, "What are you doing?" it doesn't sound like those for clean words. It sounds like, "What you doing?" And unless your brain has heard that enough times to recognize it as normal, it will panic. It won't know what to do with the sound. That's not your fault, it's just lack of training with the real rhythm of the language. I want to tell you a story about someone who went through exactly this. Her name is Isabelle. She's originally from Lyon, France, and she moved to Dublin for a new job. Isabelle had studied English for years. She could read long articles, she had passed exams, and she had even completed a few writing certifications. But when she arrived in Dublin and started working in an open office with English-speaking colleagues, she felt completely lost. People would ask her questions during meetings, and even though the words were simple, she couldn't understand. It felt like they were speaking too fast. She would leave meetings feeling discouraged and exhausted. At first, Isabelle thought she needed more vocabulary, so she made lists of new words. She bought a grammar review book. She downloaded a course on verb tenses. But nothing changed. She still couldn't follow casual conversations in real time. And that's when we had our first conversation. I asked her what kind of English she was listening to every day. She said none, really. She was reading She was studying, but she wasn't hearing English spoken naturally, especially not fast, casual, daily English. That's when everything started to shift. Isabel began a new routine. Every morning before work, she listened to one short, 2-minute dialogue in English. It was always a real-life situation: ordering lunch, making a phone call, giving directions. She listened once, without reading anything. Then she listened again, reading the transcript. Then one last time, without reading again. That was it. 5 or 6 minutes a day. But after 2 weeks, something interesting happened. One of her coworkers came to her desk and asked, "Hey, you got a minute?" Normally, Isabel would freeze. But this time, she recognized the question immediately. She didn't have to translate it in her head. She just said, "Sure." It felt natural, easy. That's what happens when you expose your brain to the real structure of English repeatedly, consistently, and in short bursts. Your brain stops seeing English as a collection of written grammar rules and starts hearing it as a living, breathing rhythm. It recognizes patterns. It starts to expect certain combinations of sounds. And slowly, it stops being shocked by the speed. I want you to think about your own experience. Have you ever studied English for months or even years, only to feel completely confused when you try to understand a movie or follow a real conversation? Have you ever felt confident writing an email, but completely lost in a phone call? That gap you're feeling, that's the disconnect between the English you studied and the English people actually speak. And this is where many learners get stuck. They keep thinking the problem is their memory, or their grammar, or their accent. But really, the issue is that they've never trained their ears for the structure of spoken English. Not the slow, clean, artificial English you hear in some apps. I mean real, daily, messy, emotional, imperfect, beautiful English. The kind of English that happens at the coffee shop, in the hallway, or at the dinner table. I'm not saying grammar and vocabulary aren't important. Of course they are, but they're not enough. Because language isn't just what you see, it's what you hear, what you feel, what you respond to. It's rhythm, it's tone, it's stress. And if your only exposure to English has been through books or exercises, your brain is missing the most important part, the sound structure. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this shift happens overnight. Isabel still had to listen many times. She still had moments when she didn't catch everything, but her mindset changed. She stopped blaming herself and started retraining her ears. She understood that fluency isn't about catching every word, it's about recognizing enough to follow the flow, and trusting that your brain is adjusting, even when it feels difficult. And the beautiful part is, once you start hearing structure, speed becomes less scary. You stop hearing a wall of sound, and you start hearing pieces, phrases, expressions, signals. You got a minute? Wanna grab lunch? Lemma check. These are real, natural expressions that come up every day, but they don't follow the written rules. They live in the rhythm. And the more you listen to that rhythm, the more your brain will make sense of it. So if you've been telling yourself that people just speak too fast, I want you to pause and ask, am I listening to real conversations? Am I training my ears for natural patterns? Or am I only studying what's written on the page? Because the moment you shift your focus from speed to structure, everything changes. That's how you build real understanding. That's how you move from confusion to clarity. And that's how you stop feeling like English is something you're chasing and start feeling like it's something you can truly live in. When we try to understand English word by word, it often feels slow, heavy, and confusing. That's because our brain isn't designed to process language one word at a time. Language, especially spoken language, happens in chunks, small, familiar groups of words that go together. These chunks are the key to real understanding. They're what give us rhythm, tone, and meaning without needing to stop and translate every individual word. And when learners shift from memorizing vocabulary to listening for phrases in context, something powerful happens. They start to understand faster, with more confidence, and with much less stress. I've worked with so many learners who believed they needed to study more vocabulary to improve their listening. They would carry notebooks filled with new words and translations. They could give you the definition of checkout or receipt, but they couldn't follow a basic sentence like, "Do you want the receipt in the bag?" because they'd never heard those words used together in real speech. That's the difference between knowing words and understanding phrases. Our brain remembers and processes what it hears in patterns, not in isolated pieces. And that shift from collecting words to recognizing chunks is one of the most important changes you can make in your listening practice. Let me tell you about Ahmed. He's from Cairo, and last year he moved to Berlin to study architecture. Before he left Egypt, he spent months preparing his English. He memorized word lists, studied grammar rules, and read news articles in English every morning. He told me he felt ready, but when he arrived in Berlin and started using English in real-life situations at the grocery store, the train station, the campus cafe, he froze. People would speak to him, and even though he knew every word individually, he couldn't understand what they were saying. It all felt too fast, too fluid, and too unpredictable. One day, he went to a local supermarket to buy a few things. He stood in line, rehearsing what he would say. He had practiced vocabulary like cashier, bag, receipt, and change, but when it was his turn and the cashier asked, "Would you like the receipt in the bag or separate?" he panicked. He recognized receipt and bag, but the rest of the sentence went too quickly. He didn't know what "would you like" or "in the bag" or "separate" sounded like when said together. He just stood there, frozen, unsure of how to respond. And that moment stayed with him. He realized something important. Knowing vocabulary wasn't enough. He needed to hear real English in the way people actually speak. That's when he started doing something different. Every morning, he listened to short daily dialogues in English, conversations about shopping, ordering food, asking for help, or giving directions. Just 2 or 3 minutes each day. Instead of focusing on individual words, he listened to how words worked together. He listened to tone, rhythm, and the way common phrases were used naturally. He didn't pause the audio to translate. He just listened and then listened again. Slowly, the patterns started to stick. After a couple of weeks, he went back to the same supermarket. This time, when the cashier asked the same question, he understood it completely. "Would you like the receipt in the bag or separate?" It sounded familiar, like something he'd already practiced. And that's the magic of listening to phrases instead of words. Your brain starts to expect the next part. It knows what usually comes next in a sentence. You don't have to translate. You just understand. I want you to think about the phrases you hear often in your life, things like, "How can I help you?" or "I'm just looking, thanks." These are not made up of complicated vocabulary, but they're powerful because they are used again and again in real conversations. When you train your ears to recognize them, you stop getting stuck on the little things. You hear the meaning, not just the words. Phrases are also easier for your brain to remember. Think about the difference between trying to remember 5 individual words like would, you, like, a, and bag, versus just remembering the full phrase, "Would you like a bag?" The second one sticks faster because it has a purpose. It has rhythm. It has context. That's how our brains naturally absorb language. We don't learn by building single bricks. We learn by seeing the full wall. When you practice listening this way, focused on phrases in context, it's not just your comprehension that improves. Your speaking becomes more fluid too. You start to use those same chunks when you respond. Instead of building your answers word by word, you pull from Real phrases you've already heard. You don't have to think so hard. You speak with more ease and confidence. That's exactly what happened with Ahmed. After a few weeks of this practice, he stopped feeling anxious in daily conversations. When someone asked him, "Do you want to eat here or take it to go?" Or, "Could you fill this out for me?" he didn't panic. These were the same phrases he had listened to in his morning practice. His brain recognized the chunks. He didn't need to understand every word. He just needed to hear the meaning. And that changed everything. So, if you've been struggling to follow conversations in English, I want you to ask yourself, am I listening to real phrases in real situations? Or am I still trying to understand everything word by word? The second method will slow you down. It will make you tired and frustrated. But the first one, listening for phrases, repeating chunks, hearing real context, that will set you free. Because when your brain starts hearing English the way it's spoken, fluency stops being something far away. It becomes something you can feel, something you can live in, one conversation at a time. One of the most powerful tools you have for learning English is repetition. I know it might sound simple, even boring, but repetition is exactly what your brain loves. It's how your brain naturally learns patterns, builds speed, and creates confidence. Think about how you learned your first language. You didn't study grammar rules or memorize vocabulary lists. You heard the same words, the same expressions, the same situations again and again until they became second nature. That's how your brain works best, through consistent, repeated exposure. When it comes to listening in English, repetition isn't just helpful, it's essential. Especially with audio. Listening to the same conversation multiple times gives your brain the chance to relax. The first time, everything feels fast and unfamiliar. You catch a few words here and there, maybe the main idea, but you miss details. The second time, you notice more. You start to hear how the speaker connects their words, how the tone rises and falls, and how certain expressions repeat. The third or fourth time, it starts to feel familiar. You anticipate what's coming. Your brain isn't guessing anymore. It's recognizing. I want to tell you about someone who discovered this through experience. His name is Luca. He's a university student in Milan, and he was feeling really discouraged about his listening skills. He told me that every time he watched a video or listened to an English podcast, he felt overwhelmed. The words moved too fast, the sentences blended together, and even when he replayed it once, it didn't seem to help much. He kept switching to different audios, hoping something would finally click. But he never stayed long enough with any one resource. It felt like running in circles. We had a conversation, and I asked him to try something different. I gave him 1 2-minute dialogue, nothing special, just a simple conversation between two friends planning their weekend. I told him to listen to it once each morning while walking to class. Same time, same audio, every day for a week. No pressure to memorize, just listen. He was skeptical at first, but he agreed to give it a try. The first day, he said it felt like usual, fast and hard to follow. But by the third day, something changed. He started to recognize phrases he hadn't noticed before, like "What are you up to?" and "Sounds like a plan." He hadn't learned those in school, but now they were sticking in his mind. By day 5, he told me he could hear the tone of voice more clearly when the speaker was being casual, when they were inviting, when they were joking. He wasn't just hearing the words, he was understanding the feeling. By the end of the week, he could predict the responses before they came. That one short conversation had become familiar territory. And with that familiarity came confidence. That's the magic of repetition. Your brain needs time to adjust. Listening once or twice is often not enough. But when you give your brain the chance to revisit the same material, something incredible happens. You stop trying so hard to translate or decode every word. Instead, you start recognizing chunks, rhythm, and meaning. You stop focusing on survival and start focusing on connection. And here's something else I've seen again and again. Learners who repeat audio feel less anxious in real conversations. Why? Because real conversations aren't that different from what you hear in good listening practice. The same phrases, the same tones, the same patterns appear over and over again in daily life. When you've heard them enough in a safe, low-pressure space like a 2-minute audio, you're not surprised when they show up in the real world. Your brain is ready. It's already met these phrases before. I want to challenge you to think about this right now. What is one short English conversation you could listen to every day for the next week? It doesn't need to be complicated. It could be about going to the store, booking an appointment, talking about weekend plans, or catching up with a friend. The important part is that it's short, natural, and useful. Something you might actually hear or use in real life. Choose one and stick with it. And don't worry if it feels too fast the first time. That's normal. But the second time, and the third time, and the fourth time, that's when your brain starts building pathways. That's when it begins to say, I know this. I've heard this before. And the more you do it, the faster you'll improve, not because you're forcing yourself, but because your brain is doing what it's naturally good at, finding patterns, adapting to sound, and remembering through repetition. One of the best things about this kind of listening is that it fits into your day easily. You don't need to sit down and study for hours. You can play the audio while brushing your teeth, riding the train, walking the dog, or waiting in line. You don't even have to give it your full attention at first. Just let the sound enter your world. Let it become part of your day. Repetition is quiet, but powerful. It works in the background, shaping your understanding even when you're not aware of it. Luca told me that after just 1 week, his confidence grew. He didn't need to look up every word anymore. He didn't feel lost in long sentences. That one dialogue had opened a door, and now he was ready to go further. He started repeating other short audios. He created his own small library of everyday conversations and listened to them on repeat. His listening skills improved, not because he studied harder, but because he listened smarter. And it all started with one repeated audio. So many learners make the mistake of chasing new content all the time. They listen once, get frustrated, and move on to something else. But the real power is in staying with one short, useful audio until it becomes part of you. That's how language moves from the outside to the inside. That's how fluency begins. Not with endless input, but with meaningful repetition that gives your brain a chance to grow strong, fast, and confident. So if you've ever thought, I'm not good at listening, maybe what you really need is a new approach. Maybe your brain is just waiting for you to hear the same thing more than once. Maybe you're closer to confidence than you think. All it takes is one small practice, repeated with purpose, and your brain will do the rest. One of the habits that slows down your listening more than anything else is translating in your head. I know it feels like the logical thing to do. You hear a sentence in English, and immediately your brain tries to find the same sentence in your native language. It's automatic. But the problem is that translation creates delay. It puts a wall between you and the real meaning of what you're hearing. Instead of being present with the sound and the context, your brain is busy jumping back and forth between two languages, trying to match everything perfectly. And that just doesn't work in real-time conversation. What works instead is visualization. When you start visualizing what's happening in a conversation, something incredible happens. Your brain becomes active, focused, and alert. It's no longer trying to turn sounds into grammar or into words on a page. It's trying to understand a scene, a moment, a story. And stories are something your brain understands deeply. That's how we've communicated for thousands of years, not by analyzing language, but by seeing situations, hearing tone, feeling emotion, and understanding intention. Visualization turns listening into a living experience, and that experience creates real comprehension. I want to tell you about Sophia. She's from Warsaw, and she used to feel completely overwhelmed when watching movies in English. Even with subtitles, she felt like she could never catch what people were actually saying. She told me it felt like the actors were talking too fast, and by the time she tried to translate one line, the scene had already moved on. So she was stuck hearing English, trying to translate, missing the next line, and feeling frustrated again and again. Then she tried something different. Instead of translating, she began visualizing. She chose short scenes from movies or audio dialogues, closed her eyes, and tried to imagine the situation. She didn't need to understand every word. She just focused on the overall image. Who is talking? Where are they? What are they doing? What's the emotion? What's the goal of this moment? It was like turning the audio into a mental movie. And slowly, everything started to shift. Sophia realized that when she pictured the scene, her brain stopped worrying about translation. It started focusing on meaning. She didn't need to hear every single word to know what was going on. She started to feel the rhythm of the conversation. She could guess the tone, the relationship between people, and even anticipate what might be said next. Her listening became faster and more intuitive. Within a few weeks, she told me she was able to follow scenes without subtitles for the first time. And not because her vocabulary had suddenly expanded, but because she stopped trying to translate and started trusting her imagination. Visualization activates a different part of the brain, one that is creative, fast, and much more in tune with natural communication. When you imagine a scene, your brain uses clues like voice, emotion, background sounds, and pauses to fill in the blanks. And that's exactly how native speakers understand each other. They don't hear every single word clearly. They hear enough, and their brain fills in the rest based on the situation. You can do that too. You just need to stop translating and start seeing. I always recommend learners pick short dialogues for this kind of practice. Not because the vocabulary is easy, but because the scene is simple. For example, imagine you're listening to a short audio where someone is ordering coffee at a cafe. You hear, "Hi, can I get a small latte to go?" Instead of thinking, "What does that mean in my language?" you picture it. Someone walking up to the counter, smiling, speaking to the barista. You see the cup, the counter, the smile. You hear the polite tone. And just like that, your brain gets the meaning without needing to translate a single word. This also works with tone of voice. If someone says, "Oh really?" in a surprised tone, you can picture their face, their body language, the expression in their eyes. Is it curiosity? Is it sarcasm? Is it excitement? These are things that language learners often miss when they focus only on words. But if you allow yourself to see the scene, even with your eyes closed, those layers of meaning become much easier to understand. Another benefit of visualization is that it helps you remember better. When you connect a phrase or expression to a visual image, it sticks in your mind longer. You're not just memorizing a definition, you're storing a whole experience. That's how children learn language. They hear, they see, they feel. And that's how adults can learn too, when we stop overthinking and start experiencing. If you're used to translating everything in your head, this shift might feel strange at first. But you can start small. The next time you listen to a short English audio, try closing your eyes. Don't try to understand every word. Just listen and imagine. Who are these people? What's happening around them? Are they sitting at a table? Walking in a park? Having an argument? Laughing together? What objects are in the scene? What's the mood? Let your imagination guide your listening. You don't need perfect grammar knowledge to understand a situation. You need context, and visualization gives you that context. It lets you step into the story instead of standing outside trying to decode it. It makes listening less of a puzzle and more of a connection. And when your brain feels connected to what it hears, understanding happens much faster and much more naturally. Sophia told me that after practicing this for just a few weeks, she started doing it even when she wasn't studying. When someone spoke to her in English on the street or at a shop, her brain started building the scene automatically. She wasn't translating anymore. She was responding in the moment. And for the first time, she felt like she was part of the conversation, not just trying to keep up. So if you've been depending on translation, I want to encourage you to try something new. Pick a short audio. Close your eyes. Imagine the scene. Don't worry about understanding every word. Let your brain experience the conversation. Let it connect the sound with the story. You'll be surprised how quickly things begin to click, not because you're translating faster, but because you're understanding deeper. And that kind of understanding stays with you. It grows. It builds confidence. And it makes English feel less like something you have to study, and more like something you can live. One of the most important things I've learned working with English learners is this: the content you choose matters. If you want to improve your listening, you need to listen to conversations that match your real life, not abstract lectures, not complicated articles. Real conversations about things you actually do, like going to the grocery store, talking to a coworker, taking the bus, or chatting about your hobbies. When the topic is relevant, your brain pays attention. It connects faster, remembers more, and learns in a way that actually sticks. Because language is about connection, and you connect most deeply with the language that reflects your world. I see so many learners spend hours trying to understand long academic texts or news reports with advanced vocabulary. And while that kind of content has its place, it's not the best place to start if your goal is to feel more confident in daily conversations. Your brain needs language that you can actually use, and that means choosing listening materials that reflect your daily routines, the situations you're in, and the words you hear around you. I want to tell you about Miguel. He's from Madrid, and he moved to Amsterdam for an internship at a tech company. Before moving, he spent months preparing his English. But his preparation was mostly academic. He listened to university lectures, read business articles, and practiced complex vocabulary. It helped him understand formal emails and presentations, but when it came to daily life, he struggled. On his first day at the office, someone asked him, "Hey, you free for lunch later?" And he didn't know how to respond. Not because he didn't understand the individual words, but because he had never heard them used that way, in that context. It happened again and again. He was fine in formal meetings, but lost in casual conversations. Ordering lunch, answering the office phone, giving directions to a delivery driver, it all felt overwhelming. That's when we talked, and I asked him a simple question: what kind of English do you need right now, today, this week? And his answer was clear. He needed to know how to talk to coworkers, ask for food, respond to quick questions, and understand directions on the street. So we made a plan. He stopped focusing on academic content and started listening to short, real conversations, exactly the kind he was facing every day. For example, one of the audios we chose was about someone ordering food at a cafe. Another was a short phone call confirming a meeting time. Another was just to people talking about their weekend plans. These weren't complicated, but they were useful, and they matched the exact type of language Miguel needed to hear. He listened to the same few dialogues again and again, just 2 or 3 minutes a day, sometimes while walking to work or making coffee. He wasn't just listening, he was training his brain to recognize the phrases, tone and rhythm of English in the situations he faced every day. And something amazing happened. After just 2 weeks, he felt more relaxed. He didn't panic when someone spoke to him at the office. He started responding without hesitation, not because he had memorized perfect answers, but because the conversations sounded familiar. His brain had already practiced them. Miguel told me one day he was in the elevator with a coworker, and they asked, "Busy day ahead?" A month earlier, he would have smiled awkwardly and said nothing. But this time, he smiled back and said, "Yeah, lots of meetings today." It was simple, but it was real. And it came from choosing listening content that matched his life. That's what I want for you, too. I want your listening practice to feel meaningful. I want it to support you in real conversations, not just help you pass a test. So take a moment and think, what do you talk about most in your daily life? What kinds of conversations do you need to understand better? Maybe it's ordering food. Maybe it's small talk at work. Maybe it's asking for help in a store, talking to your child's teacher, or checking in at a hotel. Whatever it is, that's where your listening practice should start. There's no need to begin with topics that feel far away from your world. Start with what you know. Start with what you need. That's where the fastest progress happens. Because when the topic is familiar, your brain already has a map. It knows what to expect. It recognizes the situation, and that gives you a huge advantage. You can focus on the sound, the tone, and the rhythm of the language without feeling lost in the context. And here's something else. When you focus on relevant content, you're not just improving your listening, you're building confidence. Every time you understand something in a real-life situation, it reinforces the idea that you're making progress. You're not just learning English, you're living in it. You're using it. And that's a powerful feeling. This approach works no matter where you are in your learning journey. If you're a beginner, start with basic conversations, buying groceries, introducing yourself, making small talk. If you're intermediate, go deeper into your routine, asking questions at work, dealing with customer service, making appointments. If you're more advanced, challenge yourself with realistic dialogues that include idioms or casual speech, but still focus on things that relate to your daily life. You don't need to listen to everything. You need to listen to the right things, the things that mirror your world, the things that prepare you for the moments that matter. And those are usually not the things you find in textbooks or exams. They're in real conversations happening in everyday places. When you train your ears for those, you'll feel the difference. Miguel's progress didn't come from working harder. It came from listening smarter. He stopped chasing difficult material and focused on the English he actually needed. And the result? He felt calmer, more confident, and more capable. That's what happens when your practice meets your reality. And that's exactly what I want for you. So today, think about your daily life. Think about the places you go, the people you talk to, the moments you want to feel more confident in. Then choose one short audio that fits that world. Repeat it. Listen for tone. Picture the situation. Let it become familiar. Because when the topic matches your real life, listening becomes more than just a skill, it becomes part of who you are. And that's when fluency starts to grow, not from the outside, but from within. One of the biggest reasons people feel anxious when listening to English is because they're trying to do too much at once. They're not just listening, they're also trying to understand every word, think of the grammar, remember vocabulary, and prepare a response, all at the same time. That's a lot of pressure. And when your brain is under pressure, it can't relax enough to absorb what it's hearing. But what if I told you that you don't need to respond right away? That just listening, without the need to speak, can be one of the most powerful ways to grow your confidence and improve your understanding. Listening is a skill that deserves its own space. You don't have to treat it like a test. You don't have to prove anything when you're listening. You're training your brain. You're teaching it to recognize sounds, patterns, and rhythm. And that takes time and repetition, not stress. When you separate listening from the pressure to reply, you give your brain a chance to actually listen without fear, without judgment, without rushing. And that's when real progress starts. I want to share a story about Helena. She's from Athens, and for a long time, she felt stuck in her English. She told me she understood grammar pretty well and could write emails at work, but when it came to conversations, she froze. She said, the hardest part wasn't speaking, it was listening. People would start talking, and her mind would go into panic mode. What did they just say? What do I need to answer? Should I use past tense or present perfect? Do I know the right vocabulary? All of those questions would come rushing in, and she couldn't focus on the actual conversation. The pressure to respond made her listening worse. That's when I suggested something different. I told her to forget about speaking for a while. I encouraged her to treat listening as a separate skill, like a workout for her ears. No notebooks, no exercises, no answers, just listening. I told her to find a podcast in English that felt natural and enjoyable. Something with clear, conversational tone, nothing too formal or academic. And I told her to play it while doing everyday tasks. Washing dishes, cleaning her apartment, folding laundry. The idea was to create a relaxed environment where her brain could simply receive the language without trying to analyze it. Helena picked a podcast about travel stories. Every day while doing chores, she listened to one short episode. Sometimes, she focused closely. Other times she just let the sound play in the background. She didn't stop to rewind or look up words. She didn't pressure herself to remember everything. She just listened. And something surprising happened. After about a week, she started hearing phrases more clearly. She noticed tone and emotion. She could tell when someone was joking, when they were serious, or when they were excited, even if she didn't catch every word. Her ears were getting used to the rhythm of English. She told me that one of the biggest shifts came when she stopped trying to control the process. When she gave herself permission to listen without performing, she started to enjoy it more. The pressure disappeared. It wasn't about perfection. It was about connection. And as she continued this practice, she began to recognize expressions she had never really noticed before, things like, "You know what I mean?" or "That was totally unexpected." These are expressions that don't always appear in textbooks, but they show up all the time in real conversations. And Helena was starting to absorb them naturally. Listening without pressure creates a kind of freedom that allows your brain to relax and learn. When you're not worrying about answering correctly or quickly, you're able to notice the smaller details, like how people change their tone when they're being polite versus when they're being direct, or how they pause when they're thinking, or how they use certain filler words like "well," "actually," or "I mean." These details may seem small, but they're the glue that holds conversations together. And when you hear them enough times, you start to feel them instead of just understanding them logically. This kind of listening is powerful because it mirrors how you learned your first language. No one asked you to respond when you were a child, listening to your parents or teachers. You just listened, you absorbed, and slowly, your brain put everything together. The same thing can happen with English. If you give yourself the space to listen without rushing into action, you'll find that your understanding deepens and your fear starts to fade. Helena told me that after a few weeks of this kind of passive listening, she joined a casual English conversation group. She didn't prepare, she just showed up. And when someone asked her about a recent trip, she found herself using phrases she had heard in the podcast. She didn't plan them, they just came out. That's what natural listening does. It builds language inside you until it's ready to come out on its own. You don't need to force it. I often recommend learners to make listening a daily background habit. Not everything needs to be a study session. Sometimes the best learning happens when you're not even trying that hard. Let English be part of your routine. Let it fill the quiet spaces in your day. Let your ears hear the music of the language, the pauses, the flow, the small expressions. Even if you're not answering, your brain is practicing. You don't need to prove anything when you listen. You're not on stage. You're not being tested. You're building a skill, quietly, steadily, and with patience. And that skill will serve you when it's time to speak. You'll find yourself responding more naturally, not because you memorized a script, but because your brain is used to the sound and rhythm of real English. It's familiar, and that familiarity becomes confidence. So if you're feeling stuck or nervous about your listening skills, try giving yourself permission to just listen. No pressure, no expectations. Find a voice you enjoy, a topic that interests you, and let it play in the background while you do something simple. Give your ears time to adjust. Let the language come to you. That quiet, passive space might be exactly what you need to grow faster than you ever imagined. Subtitles can be helpful. They really can, when you're just starting to train your ears. In English, subtitles give you a bridge between sound and meaning. They allow you to connect what you hear with the words on the screen. But here's something I want you to remember. Subtitles are a tool, not a solution. If you rely on them too much, you stop listening. You start reading. And reading is not the same as understanding spoken English. If your goal is to follow fast, natural conversations, you need to learn how to hear English, not read it. Many learners tell me they feel confident watching English series with subtitles. They can follow the story, laugh at the jokes, and enjoy the experience. But the moment they turn off the subtitles, they feel lost. And that's not because they don't know the language. It's because their brain never had the chance to develop the listening part. It was focused on reading the whole time. That's why it's so important to use subtitles the right way, especially if you want to become a better listener. I want to tell you about Jan, a university student from Prague. Jan loved watching American and British series. He said it was his favorite way to relax after studying. And it was all in English. Great, right? But every time he watched, he kept the English subtitles on. He told himself it was helping him learn, and in some ways it was. He was learning vocabulary, seeing sentence structure, noticing expressions. But after a while, he noticed something strange. Even though he watched a lot of English shows, he still struggled to understand people in real conversations. The moment someone spoke without subtitles, he froze. Jan realized he was doing most of his learning with his eyes, not his ears. He wasn't really listening. He was reading fast and matching what he read to what he heard. That's not bad, especially in the beginning. But if you want to improve your listening, you have to let your ears do the work. And for that, you need a different method. I shared a simple technique with Jan, and it completely changed the way he approached listening practice. It goes like this. Watch or listen 3 times, first without subtitles, then with subtitles, then again without subtitles. Let me break that down. The first time, you listen without any help. No subtitles. Just let your ears do the work. It might feel difficult. That's okay. The goal is not to understand everything. It's to train your brain to listen closely, to pay attention to the sound, the tone, and the flow. Even if you only catch the general idea, that's enough for the first round. Then, you watch the same part again, this time with subtitles. Now, you check your understanding. You look at the words. You see the phrases. You find out what you missed. This step helps you fill in the gaps and gives your brain a clearer picture of how the sounds connect to meaning. Finally, you go back and watch it one more time again without subtitles. Now that your brain knows the context and the words, it can focus more on the sound. You'll hear the phrases more clearly. You'll recognize how the speakers link their words together, how they pronounce things naturally, and how their voice carries emotion. And because you've already seen the text, your brain isn't guessing anymore. It's confirming. That's what Jan started doing. He chose short scenes, just 2 or 3 minutes from a series he already liked. He followed this 3-step method every evening. It didn't take much time, but after a week, he told me he started hearing things he never noticed before. He said he finally understood why certain words sounded different than how they looked on paper. He could hear the contractions, the connected speech, the natural rhythm. And because he wasn't reading anymore, he was really listening. After about a month, Jan did something he had never done before. He watched a full episode without subtitles. It wasn't perfect. He didn't catch every word, but he followed the story. He understood the tone, the feeling, the humor, and more importantly, he felt proud. His ears were doing the work. That moment gave him the confidence to keep going. Subtitles are useful at first. They can help you get started, especially when the language feels too fast or too unfamiliar. But if you keep them on forever, you limit your growth. You train your eyes, not your ears. And your goal is to understand English as it's spoken, not just as it's written. That's why it's so important to find that balance. Use subtitles to check, to support, to confirm. But don't let them do all the work for you. If you're used to subtitles, I understand that turning them off feels risky. It feels like you might miss something. But remember, missing parts is part of the learning process. That's how your brain learns to pay attention. That's how it starts to notice patterns and fill in meaning. And when you combine that with repetition and the 3-step method, your understanding grows faster than you expect. I always encourage learners to start with scenes they already enjoy. Pick something short, something with casual, everyday conversation. That way, the language is useful, and the context helps you guess meaning even when your ears don't catch everything. Practice the 3 steps. Listen without subtitles, then with subtitles, then again without. Try it for a week and see how much more confident your ears become. The goal is not to remove subtitles forever. The goal is to learn how to use them as a tool, not a crutch. The difference is simple. A tool helps you build something. A crutch holds you up when you're not ready to walk. I believe you are ready. You just need a strategy that helps you move forward, not stay in place. Listening without reading is a skill. And like any skill, it takes time, consistency, and the right method. Jan's story is not unique. I've seen so many learners improve their listening by making this one small change. And you can do it too. You don't need hours of study. You need focused, smart listening. You need to trust your ears. And you need to give your brain the chance to hear English as it really is, not just as it appears on a screen. So, next time you watch your favorite series or listen to an English video, try the method. First without subtitles, then with them, then without again. Let your ears practice. Let your brain adjust. The more you do this, the more natural English will sound. And that's when listening becomes less of a challenge and more of a skill you truly own. One thing I hear often from learners is, I listen to podcasts, but I still can't understand people in real life. And I get it. You're doing everything right, exposing yourself to English, listening to native speakers, trying to understand natural speed, but it still feels too fast, too overwhelming, and too hard to follow. The reason is not your ability. The reason is context. Listening to fast English is only helpful if you understand the context. Without it, your brain is just trying to survive. But when you know what's happening in the scene, even fast speech becomes more manageable. That's why I always tell learners, real speed is good, but only inside controlled situations. You don't have to avoid fast conversations. You just have to choose them wisely. When you practice with short dialogues where the setting is clear and the vocabulary is familiar, your brain starts to process English faster without stress. It's like training on a smaller field before playing in a big stadium. You focus on the movements, the rhythm, the reactions, all in a space where you know what's going on. And this is exactly the kind of practice that builds real listening skills. Let me tell you about Elena. She lives in Vienna and works part-time at a bookstore while studying international tourism. She's always loved the idea of traveling and connecting with people from around the world, but she felt very nervous when speaking English. What frustrated her the most, though, was listening, especially in places like hotels, airports, or phone calls, places where people spoke quickly and didn't repeat themselves. She told me about one moment that stuck with her. She was checking into a hotel during a study trip in Lisbon, and the receptionist gave her the usual information: checkout time, breakfast hours, Wi-Fi code. But Elena couldn't follow it. She had to ask the woman to repeat everything 3 times. And even then, she still felt unsure. She said she wished she could slow the world down just a little, just enough to catch her breath. That's when she reached out, and I suggested something simple: stop listening to long podcasts for now, and instead focus on short, high-context conversations. 2 minutes long, clear situation, familiar vocabulary. I sent her a few audio dialogues about booking appointments, talking to hotel staff, asking for directions, and confirming travel details. Each one was under 3 minutes, and the setting was obvious. You knew exactly who was talking, where they were, and what they wanted. No confusion. No guessing. Elena committed to listening to 1 dialogue per day, every morning before school. She didn't use subtitles. She just played the same audio several times, first to get the general idea, then again to catch the phrases, then once more to notice the tone. And after a few days, she started recognizing patterns. She could hear how people confirmed times, asked polite questions, or gave information clearly. Things like, your checkout is at 11, or would you like to schedule your appointment for tomorrow afternoon? These phrases became familiar. She told me that the first time she re-listened to a dialogue she had heard the day before, it felt completely different. The speed didn't scare her anymore. She knew the context, so her brain could focus on the sound. That was the breakthrough. She realized that it wasn't the speed that made listening hard, it was the uncertainty. Once the context was clear, the same fast English became understandable, predictable even. A few weeks later, Elena went on another short trip, this time to Copenhagen, and she stayed in a small hotel. At check-in, the receptionist spoke quickly, just like before. But this time, Elena didn't panic. She heard, breakfast is from 7 to 10, Wi-Fi password is on your keycard, and you can check out anytime before noon. She didn't need to ask for repetition. She understood everything the first time. And that small moment made her feel like all her practice had been worth it. This is what I want for you to feel: calm when English comes at full speed, not because you slowed the world down, but because you trained your brain to recognize it. And the best way to do that is to start with short dialogues that give you controlled context. When the situation is familiar, your brain doesn't waste time trying to figure out what's going on. It goes straight to understanding the message. Long podcasts can be great for later stages, but in the beginning, they often move too fast and switch topics without warning. It's like jumping into a movie. Halfway through you hear the words, but you have no idea what the scene is about. That's why I always recommend starting with short pieces where everything is clear. Think of it as practicing with training wheels. You're building the skill step by step, in a space that feels safe and manageable. Choose topics that match what you actually experience in daily life: checking into hotels, making phone calls, buying tickets, asking questions at work, or greeting a visitor. These conversations use the same expressions again and again. They are perfect for repetition. And when you hear them often enough, they stop sounding fast. They start sounding normal, Another thing that helps is listening multiple times with different goals. The first time, just understand the situation. The second time, catch the structure and key phrases. The third time, listen to the rhythm, the tone, and the natural speed. By repeating with a clear focus each time, you teach your brain to hear more than just words. You hear meaning. Elena told me that now, even when she listens to longer content, she breaks it into smaller parts. She doesn't try to understand everything in one go. She listens to the first few minutes, then pauses, reflects, and repeats. She creates her own controlled context inside more complex materials. And because of that habit, her confidence keeps growing. You don't need to understand everything at once. You just need to create the right conditions for your brain to feel safe and focused. Short dialogues, real conversations, and clear context, that's the combination that works. And when you practice like that every day, you'll be surprised at how quickly the speed of English stops feeling like a barrier and starts feeling like something you can actually keep up with. Just like Elena did, when it comes to improving your English listening skills, I want to share one of the most important truths I've learned. Consistency beats intensity. It's easy to think that if you study hard for a long session once or twice a week, you'll make fast progress. But the truth is, short and frequent practice wins the game. 5 minutes every day will help your brain for more than a long, exhausting session once a week. Your brain loves routine. It loves small, daily wins. And that steady exposure is what builds real, lasting listening skills. Let me tell you about David from Stockholm. David is a software engineer who travels by train every day to work. Before he started focusing on his English listening, he would try to squeeze in long study sessions during the weekend or when he had free time. But he found those sessions overwhelming, and sometimes he would feel so tired after studying that he just gave up. His progress was slow and frustrating. He felt stuck. One day, David decided to change his approach. Instead of waiting for the perfect time or the perfect mood to study, he decided to make listening part of his daily routine. He started with just 5 minutes a day, nothing more. During his train ride, he played short audio dialogues or podcasts on topics that interested him, things he could follow without feeling lost. Sometimes it was a conversation about ordering food, other times it was a short story or a travel tip. He didn't pressure himself to understand every word. He just listened. David's new routine made a huge difference. Every day, his brain had a little workout. He didn't notice the change immediately, but after about 2 weeks, he realized he was understanding more and more without needing to rewind the audio. The voices sounded clearer. The phrases came faster. The rhythm felt natural. He stopped feeling lost in the middle of conversations and started catching the meaning on the first try. This progress motivated him to keep going, even on days when he was tired or busy. What I love about David's story is how he used his everyday moments to practice. The train ride was a perfect opportunity, quiet enough to listen, but routine enough that it became a habit. You don't need to find special time for English. You can make it part of your life, in small doses, repeated every day. 5 minutes might sound short, but the power of daily listening comes from the way your brain builds connections over time. Each session strengthens your ability to recognize sounds, understand tone, and follow conversations naturally. If you're thinking, I don't have time for 5 minutes every day, try to remember that this kind of practice doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be a study session with notebooks and tests. It can be playing a short English audio while you're cooking, walking, or even resting. The key is making it a habit. The more you listen regularly, the easier it gets. Your brain gets used to English as a sound, a rhythm, and a way of expressing ideas, not just as words you have to memorize. Another benefit of daily short sessions is that they keep your motivation steady. When you study for hours only once a week, it's easy to get discouraged if you don't see quick progress. But when you commit to just a few minutes every day, you see small improvements often. You hear a new phrase, understand a joke, or follow a story a little better. Those small wins add up, and they keep you motivated to keep listening. I often remind learners that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. It's about steady, ongoing work. If you try to rush, you might burn out. But if you listen a little every day, you build strong, flexible skills that grow naturally. The brain loves patterns. It loves repetition. And daily listening creates exactly that. David told me that after just 3 weeks of his new routine, he noticed something exciting. When he played an audio on the train, he no longer needed to rewind and replay parts to catch what was said. His brain was working faster and more efficiently. That was a turning point for him. Suddenly, listening wasn't frustrating anymore. It was enjoyable. It felt like a real conversation. That feeling of ease is what you want to experience too. I encourage you to find your own small windows for listening every day. Maybe it's 5 minutes during your morning coffee, or while getting ready for work, or while walking your dog. Pick a time that feels natural and stick to it. Choose audios or podcasts that fit your level and interests. Don't worry about understanding every word. Focus on the flow, the sounds, the feelings. Let your brain absorb English bit by bit. Over time, those small, daily sessions will transform your listening skills. You'll find yourself understanding faster, catching new expressions, and feeling confident even when the speaker talks quickly. The key is to make listening a habit, a simple, enjoyable part of your day. When you do that, your progress will surprise you, just like it surprised David. So remember, it's not about how long you listen, but how often you listen. Short and frequent beats long and rare. 5 minutes a day, every day, is a powerful habit that will bring you closer to fluency. Keep it simple, keep it consistent, and let your ears train naturally. You're building something important, one small step at a time. One of the biggest hurdles for English learners, especially when it comes to listening, is the fear of missing words. I hear it all the time. I don't understand every word, so I must not be learning. Or, if I don't catch every detail, I'm failing. But here's something I want you to remember: understanding every single word is not necessary to follow a conversation or enjoy a video. In fact, focusing on every word can actually slow you down and make listening much harder. What really matters is understanding the main idea, the message, the overall meaning. I want to share a story about Noor from Oslo, who struggled with exactly this. Noor was very committed to improving her English. She would watch videos, listen to podcasts, and try to follow along. But her biggest problem was that she kept pausing every few seconds. If she didn't understand a word, she would stop, rewind, look it up, and then start again. This made her watching experience slow and frustrating. Sometimes, she said, it felt like she was stuck on the same 5 minutes for an hour. The more she focused on individual words, the less she understood the full story. She was missing the forest for the trees. Noor told me that this habit made her anxious. She felt like she wasn't making progress, even though she was spending a lot of time with English. It was exhausting. She wanted to enjoy listening and watching, but instead, it became stressful and overwhelming. I explained to her that language is about meaning, not perfection. You don't need to understand every word to follow what's going on. Instead, you need to develop the skill of using context to fill in the gaps. Context is your best friend when listening. When you hear words you don't know, your brain can use the surrounding information to guess the meaning. For example, if someone says, "I need to book a flight for next week," but you miss the word book, you still understand from the rest of the sentence and the situation that they are talking about travel plans. The meaning stays clear. even without every single word. That's the skill I encouraged Noor to practice. I told Noor to change her approach. Instead of stopping to translate or look up every unknown word, she should keep going and try to trust the overall context. It would be difficult at first, but over time, she'd build confidence in her ability to understand without perfect knowledge. I suggested she start with short videos or audios 2 to 3 minutes long and listen through once without pausing. Even if she missed some words, she should try to catch the general idea. Then, on a second listen, she could pay more attention to details, but still avoid stopping too often. Noor took this advice seriously. She began listening to videos about daily life, short conversations, simple stories, travel tips. At first, it was hard to stop the habit of pausing, but she kept reminding herself that it was okay to miss words. She focused on getting the main message. She realized that understanding about 70% was enough to follow most conversations comfortably. In fact, she found that she could enjoy the content much more without the constant interruptions. One day, Noor told me she was watching a popular English TV show without subtitles and noticed she wasn't pausing every few seconds anymore. She could follow the story, laugh at the jokes, and understand the emotions, even if she didn't know every expression. She felt more relaxed and more confident. That was a big step for her. She learned that language learning isn't about perfection. It's about communication. This idea, focusing on the big picture rather than every word, is one of the most useful strategies for improving listening. It's the difference between decoding and understanding. Decoding means translating each word individually, which slows you down and breaks the flow. Understanding means catching the message, the feeling, and the intention. That's where real fluency lives. When you listen, your brain is working hard to put together sounds, meanings, and context. If you focus on every word, your brain can't keep up. You get stuck, and your confidence drops. But when you focus on the idea, your brain uses clues from the conversation, tone of voice, topic, body language if you're watching video to fill in what's missing. This skill takes practice, but it's a skill anyone can develop. If you're used to pausing or translating every word, try this exercise. Pick a short audio or video. Listen all the way through without stopping. Don't worry if you miss things. Just focus on the story or conversation. After you finish, ask yourself, what was the main message? What happened? What were they talking about? Then listen again if you want, and try to catch more details. Over time, you'll notice that your understanding improves and you'll feel less need to pause. Remember, you don't have to know every word to understand English. What matters is that you connect with the message, feel the emotion, and follow the conversation. Language is about communication, not perfection. When you accept that, your listening becomes easier, more enjoyable, and more natural. Noor's story shows us that trusting the context and focusing on the idea can change everything. She stopped being afraid of missing words and started enjoying English in a way she never thought possible. You can do this too. Let go of the need to catch every word and start listening for meaning. Your brain will thank you, and your confidence will grow. So next time you listen, try to relax. Don't stop every few seconds. Trust the context. Focus on the big picture. Understanding 70% or more is enough to keep up and enjoy real conversations. That mindset shift is a game changer, and it will help you take your listening skills to the next level. One of the things I always emphasize when it comes to learning English listening is that it's not just about logic or understanding every word perfectly. It's about feeling the language, the emotions behind the words. When you listen with emotion, your brain remembers much more easily. You don't just store the words as vocabulary. You connect them to real feelings, real situations, and that makes them stick in your mind naturally. Emotional engagement turns language learning into a richer experience. I want to share a story about Anya from Budapest. Anya was someone who struggled with traditional listening practice. She tried the usual methods: audio lessons, podcasts, news clips, but she often found them dry and hard to focus on. The words felt like a list of sounds rather than something alive. Then she discovered a new way to practice. She started watching romantic comedy scenes in English. At first, it was just for fun, but she noticed something important. She felt connected to the characters' feelings, whether it was the excitement of a new date, the awkwardness of a misunderstanding, or the joy of a happy ending. That emotional connection made the English much easier to remember. Anya told me that when she watched these scenes, she wasn't just listening with her ears. She was listening with her heart. She laughed when the jokes were funny. She felt tense during the dramatic moments. And because of this, the phrases and expressions she heard stuck with her in a way that textbooks never managed. Instead of mechanical repetition, she was experiencing English in context, full of life and meaning. This emotional engagement helped Anya in several ways. First, it made her more motivated to practice regularly because the content was enjoyable and relatable. Second, it helped her notice the tone, pitch, and rhythm of spoken English, which are key to natural listening. When a speaker is angry, happy, or confused, their voice changes, and those changes help you understand the message beyond the words. And third, because she was emotionally involved, her brain was creating stronger memory connections, making it easier to recall phrases in real conversations. Listening with emotion is a powerful way to deepen your connection with English. It's not just about logic or grammar rules. It's about feeling the language as people use it in real life. When you hear laughter, surprise, or frustration, you're not only understanding the words, you're understanding the human experience behind them. That makes listening more meaningful and learning more natural. If you want to try this approach, start by picking audio or videos that make you feel something. It could be scenes from a movie, funny podcasts, interviews where the speakers share personal stories, or even songs. The key is to choose material that resonates with you emotionally. When you care about what you're hearing, your brain is more engaged, and your listening skills improve faster. I also encourage you to pay attention to the emotions in the voices you hear. Notice how people stress certain words when they're excited or slow down when they're sad. These emotional clues are part of the language, just as important as vocabulary or grammar. By tuning into these signals, you'll find it easier to understand not just what is said, but how it's said. Anya's experience is a great example of how emotions can transform listening practice. Instead of struggling with dry, boring audio, she found joy and connection in romantic comedy scenes. This emotional engagement made English feel real and alive. She stopped thinking of listening as a chore and started enjoying it as a way to experience stories and feelings. So, when you listen to English, try to go beyond the words. Let yourself feel curiosity, laughter, excitement, or even a little frustration. Use those feelings as a bridge to connect with the language. When you do that, you'll notice that your listening becomes clearer, more natural, and much more enjoyable. Your brain will remember phrases faster, and your confidence will grow. Remember, language is a human tool. It's meant to express feelings, ideas, and experiences. When you listen with emotion, you're tapping into the heart of communication. That's where real fluency begins, not just knowing words, but feeling them. Try this with your next listening session and see how it changes the way you connect with English. One of the most effective ways to improve your English listening and speaking at the same time is a technique called shadowing. Shadowing means you listen to a conversation or dialogue and then repeat what you hear immediately after, trying to match the rhythm, tone, and pace of the speaker. It's like being a language mirror. This technique trains your brain and mouth to work together, helping you develop a natural flow and intonation in English. When you shadow, you're not just repeating words, you're copying the music of the language. I want to tell you about Tomasz from Krakow, who discovered the power of shadowing through recording himself. Tomasz was focused on improving his listening skills, but he also wanted to sound more natural when he spoke. He started with simple customer service dialogues, common conversations that you might hear at a store or a hotel. He listened carefully to the dialogues and then recorded himself repeating each line. At first, Tomasz said his voice sounded very robotic and unnatural. He sounded stiff, like he was reading a script instead of having a real conversation. That's a common experience. When you first start shadowing, it's normal to feel awkward. The rhythms, stresses, and intonations of English can feel strange, especially if your native language has very different patterns. Tomasz told me that he was tempted to give up after a few days because it felt unnatural, but he kept going. He knew that this discomfort was part of the process. Every time he listened and repeated, he was training his brain and mouth to sync up better with English. After about 2 weeks of daily practice, Tomasz noticed a big change. His voice started to sound more natural. The robotic tone disappeared. He was matching the rhythm and tone of the speakers in the dialogues more closely. He said it felt like he was finding the music in English, the ups and downs, the pauses, the flow that makes conversations sound real and alive. That was a breakthrough for him. Shadowing helped Tomasz in more ways than just his pronunciation. Because he was focusing on rhythm and tone, he became a better listener. He started to anticipate what speakers would say next, and he understood the conversations more easily. His brain learned to process English not as separate words, but as connected sounds with meaning and emotion. And when he spoke with others, his conversations felt smoother and more confident. One of the best things about shadowing is that you can do it anywhere and anytime. You don't need a teacher or a partner. You just need a recording device and some audio you like. It can be short dialogues, podcast snippets, or even clips from movies. The key is to listen carefully and try to repeat immediately, matching the speaker's pace and tone as closely as possible. If you're new to shadowing, start with very short pieces, just a few sentences. Listen once or twice to get the feel. Then record yourself repeating it. Don't worry if you don't get it perfect. The goal is to practice the rhythm and natural flow, not to memorize every word perfectly. Over time, you'll find your voice sounding more natural and your listening improving. Tomasz also told me that recording himself was a game changer because it gave him feedback. When you hear yourself, you can notice what sounds robotic or unnatural. You can compare your voice to the original and adjust. This kind of self-awareness speeds up your learning because you're actively noticing and correcting your mistakes. Another tip is to focus not just on words, but on stress and intonation. English speakers stress certain words to show importance or emotion. When you shadow, try to copy those stresses and the melody of the sentences. This makes your English sound much more fluent and helps you understand native speakers better because you're learning the patterns they use naturally. Remember, shadowing is not about speaking perfectly or sounding like a native speaker immediately. It's about training your brain and mouth to work together smoothly, so you can listen and speak more confidently. It's a practice that builds muscle memory for your voice and helps you catch the natural rhythm of English conversations. If you want to start shadowing, pick a short audio that feels interesting to you. Listen carefully, then record yourself repeating after the speaker. Do this a few times every day. After a week or two, listen to your recordings and notice how your rhythm and tone improve. You'll be surprised at how much more natural your English sounds. Tomasz's journey shows us that shadowing is a powerful tool, but it requires patience and practice. It's normal to sound robotic at first. That's your brain and mouth adjusting to a new rhythm. But if you keep going, you'll start to sound more natural and fluent. And you'll understand spoken English better because your brain is learning to hear the language as it really is, not just in words, but in rhythm, tone, and emotion. So, if you want to boost both your listening and speaking skills, try recording yourself and shadowing dialogues. Let your voice become a mirror of natural English. This simple daily practice can make a big difference in how you understand and use the language. Keep practicing and enjoy the process of finding your own natural rhythm in English. I want to leave you with a simple but powerful challenge, one that can truly change the way you improve your English listening skills. For the next week, I invite you to listen to one short conversation in English every single day. It doesn't have to be long, just a minute or two is perfect. You can listen to the same conversation every day or choose a different one if you prefer. The most important thing is consistency. Making this a daily habit will help your brain get used to hearing natural English and make progress without feeling overwhelmed. You might be wondering, why just one conversation a day? It's because small, focused steps are easier to stick to and create real change over time. When you commit to this daily practice, you train your ears and your brain regularly. Your listening muscles get stronger, and you start recognizing patterns and expressions naturally. This habit helps you build confidence, even if you're busy or tired. Just one conversation each day is manageable, but when you do it every day, the results add up quickly. Think about your daily routine for a moment. Where could you fit this listening practice? Maybe during your morning coffee, your commute, or while cooking dinner. It doesn't have to be a separate study session or something that takes extra effort. The key is to choose a time that feels easy and natural for you. When listening becomes part of your daily life, it stops feeling like a chore and becomes an enjoyable moment. I want to encourage you to try different types of conversations. You could listen to a dialogue about ordering food, a short travel conversation, a customer service call, or even a quick chat about hobbies. The variety will keep things interesting and expose you to different vocabulary and situations. The goal is to stay curious and engaged. When you enjoy what you listen to, your brain absorbs the language faster and more effectively. If you ever feel stuck or frustrated, remember that this challenge is about progress, not perfection. You don't need to understand every word or every sentence right away. The focus is on training your ear and getting familiar with natural English sounds and rhythms. Over time, your understanding will improve, and you'll notice yourself catching more and more. Now, if this episode has helped you or given you new ideas about how to practice listening, I'd love for you to share it with someone else who is learning English too. Sharing helps our community grow, and it's a great way to support others on their language journey. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode. We'll keep exploring new tips and strategies to help you become more confident and fluent in English. Remember, learning English is a journey, and every small step counts. One conversation a day might seem simple, but it's a challenge that can change everything. I believe in you and your ability to improve, and I'm excited to be part of your learning journey. So take this challenge, make it your own, and watch how your listening skills grow day by day.